and pretty soon we'll be going to the polls. In a bit, I'll tell you what we'll be doing today. Don't go away. And you're welcome back to the Voters' Diary. Today, our focus will be on the 1996 elections. It was an important election year because that year we saw a number of election reforms, from the change of the name INEC to the Electoral Commission, the establishment of that. Also, the use of the transparent ballot boxes and the inculcation of party agents during registration and voting. These reforms were introduced in that year. And that same year, two quite very prominent names that will become household names in our everyday activities were also voted out of Parliament. Eben Chambers and Hawa Yakubu. We'll be looking at that and many more in the year 1996 when Ghana went to the polls. So to do that today, I have with me two gentlemen who were with me yesterday and they're with me again today to look at the 1996 elections. I have Godfred Akoto Boafo, head of current affairs here at City FM and City TV. Godfred, welcome.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure.
I also have Kojo Akoto Boateng, is head of new media here at City FM and City TV. Kojo, welcome.
Thank you very much, Vivian.
Okay, guys, so I think we should start from the reforms. 1996, there's a lot happening there, so I'm not going to play around the bush. I'm just going to go and then we can look at a lot of things as possible. So let's start with 1996, the electoral reforms we saw at the time. Prior to that, we had the election body called INEC, and then the Electoral Commission, as we know today, in 1996, came into being. Godfred, give us some more of the reforms we saw at that period.
Well, before I even get to that, Vivian, 1996, in my opinion, is perhaps the most important election that we have held. A lot of people will look at the 1992 because it ushered in the return of multi-party democracy. But 1996, as you have stated, is important for a number of reasons. We saw an entrenchment of the multi-party democracy that we thought we should have had in 1992. As we discussed yesterday, we did not see that in 1992. But in 1996, we had the INEC, as you moved on, that moved to become the EC at that time, so set up. Now, once we had the EC set up, we also had the parties agree to what became known as the IPAC.
That's right.
Now very famous, but back then it was a novelty. This was a group of, this was an advisory unit made up of the various political parties. And they discussed reforms. And again, as you rightly put it, among the reforms that they set forth, most of them were to be implemented in the 1996 election. So they dealt with the photo ID on a pilot basis. That was what was supposed to happen.
So that's the time we saw the photo ID in our electoral system
for the first time. We were using the thumbprint card at that point. We saw the compilation of a new voters register at the time. They agreed that we're going to have party agents for the first time in an election. We moved from the opaque ballot box to the transparent ballot box. For those of you who saw the 1992 election, you had this iron dustbin on the table with EC plastered on it. But come 1996, all those things changed. And then, most importantly, I told people, our listeners and our viewers, to mark certain things. The 1992 election was held on 2 different days.
Yes.
So we had the parliamentary election held in November, and then we had the presidential election being held in December. Now, the acrimony that came out of that particular election led to the boycott of the parliamentary election. And nobody wanted that scenario again because, like I said, it did affect the legitimacy of the election. And nobody wants to hold a so-called democratic election that lacks legitimacy in the eyes of the international frontiers. So we decided to say, okay, let's do this on the same day. So IPAC agreed that December 7th, which has come to be
our election
date, we are going to hold elections. Now, it's also important, and that's why I say 1996 is important. You see, a lot of seminal things are happening. Now, if you look at 1996 as well, I consider it important because, Vivian, it was the first time that we saw a complete change, or I would say a consolidation of the political topography of Ghana. Now, if you look at this, we had what we call the Progressive Alliance, and then we had the Great Alliance.
That's right.
If you look at the combos here, and I'll explain, the Great Alliance of the MPP PCP was made up of Dankwa Buzia and Nkrumah's elements.
That's right.
If you know your political history, they dislike each other like nobody's business. Nkrumah is considered the UP Dankwa Buzia tradition, the reason for the overthrow of Kwame Nkrumah and all the things that have happened. They have never seen eye to eye. Here they were, joined at the hip. You had the the NDC at this time throw out its running mate at the time, Aka, who goes to join the opposition party as a running mate candidate.
And that cost them the election as well, and
in a certain way.
In a certain
way. Here we were, and people are like, okay, this is interesting. And even the reason why these parties came together, especially the Great Alliance as we know it, was interesting in the sense that these parties sat down and said, okay, 1992, these people formed Great Alliance and they beat us. They formed the Progressive Alliance and they won. We went solo. They hammered us completely. So there is sense in putting our differences together. And there was history to this. Now, prior to that, you remember the Kumi Preko demonstration?
Yes.
For the first time, we saw Akufo was there. UP tradition. But we had Kwesi Pratt.
That's right.
Very staunch Nkrumahist coming through.
Joining that.
We had Reku Brobe, who came from a different tradition as well. Okay, and they organized massive demonstrations across the country. So if they could do this in Kumasi, they could organize in Kumasi, they could organize in Tamale, organize in Takra, they organize in Accra to that extent, and move crowds as we saw then. The idea was, why then can't we put our political differences aside? Let's talk real politics here. There is no way we are removing Jerry John Rawlings
individually as parties.
The only way we are removing Jerry Rawlings, or we even stand a chance against Jerry Rawlings, is if we put our differences together and come aside and come together. Now, if you look at those parties as well, if you had a bit more of real politics, they realize that, look, the NDC as a party had benefited more from forging alliances than any other political party at that point. People refuse to look at it, but if you look at somebody like, I'll run through a few names. Mumini Baumia came from an Nkrumahist tradition. Kojo Chikata, Obeda Samoa, kind of background, but all of them became what? Staunch members of the PNG. So these, the MPP and the alliance in the PCP said, okay, if the NDC has done this successfully and has become such a strong party, what prevents us from putting our differences aside, looking at what we've been able to do with Kumi Preko, put ourselves together and forge ahead and see what we can get. So again, very, very, very important election. And I'll explain a few other things once we get into the numbers.
The parties, the role they play, how it turned out for the NDC and the NPP. But let's bring in Kojo to buttress your point on the electoral parties and some of the roles they play. I want us to go to the NDC at the time and the coalition they had at the time, where we had Nkansenaka there, and then the breakouts. That story, which we've seen retold in a different way with the book, Ahoy's book and all that, to give us a bit of that historical division, Kojo, if you can.
I think that's better explained with figures, right?
Yeah, no, go ahead and feel.
In 1992, if you look at the fact that the parties have not gotten to the level they were in 1996, where they knew that at all costs they cannot remove Rawlings, but they could take a chunk of the votes and consolidate their foundations for the future. You compare what they did in 1996 and the reforms plus the work they did, and you look at the figures, you realize that the work they did actually gave them some results. So, for example, if you look at the makeup of parliament in 1992, there was the MPP who didn't have any representation in parliament. NDC had 189 seats, CPP nothing, PNC, independent candidates 2, NCP had 8, and the Eagle Party had 1. That was 1992. Then fast forward to 1996, a lot of activism, a lot of work being done, parties getting together to work. Now, you check the 1996 parliamentary configuration, and NPP now has 62 seats. NDC has 132. So NDC had lost 57 seats. And if a party loses as many as 57 seats in an election, it shows that something has happened. Opposition has gained grounds and they were pushing. And the CPP had 5 votes. And PNC also had 1 vote. The independent candidates didn't get anything. And it went on and on. Now, let's go down even to presidential to give you a better picture of how the figures turned out to be. Now, in 1992, the NDC practically had all the regions, okay, except the Ashanti region. And the NDC had 59.14% of the votes. NPP had 29%. Then you fast forward, move to 1996, and NPP is now getting 39% instead of the 29 they got the previous year. 10% added to their 29%, which is also a very huge jump if you look at electoral figures and electoral shifts. So a lot of activism, a lot of work together by the parties, coalitions being formed here and there, other parties also having internal issues, like you mentioned, changing the electoral numbers at the end of the day, pushing the opposition party a bit higher in preparation for the 2000 elections, which would see us moving from the NDC to the NPP. Vivian.
Okay, so let's start with, I think now it's time to really go into the
elections and how it went.
Of the matter and start with the presidential elections, where in the end, as compared to the parliamentary elections, where we saw 7 or 6 parties competing, in the real elections, presidential elections, we had 3. The Alliance...
the other Progressive Alliance, the
Great Alliance, and the PNC going, the 3 of them
so
going.
let me just run you through the numbers. So, Vivian, overall, we had a little over 7 million votes cast in that particular election. If you look at the total votes cast, Lieutenant General Jerry Rawlings leading the Progressive Alliance, with his running mate, John Evans Atamils, who was a newbie after he had kicked out his vice president, Konkansen Akar. He polled a little over 4 million votes, which was 57%. Jay Kufuor, who was representing the Great Alliance, had come in. He had replaced Edu Boateng as well. So Edu Boateng didn't come back. So
Kufuor
took that one.
And the interesting running mate of Kufuor.
Oh yes, he had Konkansen Akar.
Akar moved from and then came to now be with Kufuor.
And like you rightly said, it was a significant disadvantage, and I'll tell you why. For Kufuor, in a while, Kufuor polled almost 3 million, so 2.8 million was the numbers that he polled. He attracted 39%, and Ian Mahama, Edward Nasigri Mahama of the PNC polled a little, and he polled 3%.
2.95% of the 211,000 votes as shown by the chart.
So he had 3% of the election. Now, if you want to break down the numbers, Vivian, Kufuor did really well as compared to Professor Albert Edu Boateng. Now, this was a better performance in comparison because Edu Boateng had 30.4%. Now, if you look at Kufuor, he took it up. Now, he benefited obviously from the formation of the Great Alliance. That meant that the analysis that they had done, that if we're able to merge with our friends from the Nkrumah side, we might be able to make a dent, actually reflected in the votes. Secondly, Kufuor was an attractive candidate. He spoke well. He had a good, clean reputation in Ghanaian politics. He had a bit of crossover attraction So all these things contributed to Kufuor's decent performance. One would say it was an excellent performance.
It wasn't, because he actually, if you look at the regional distribution, he only won the Ashanti region.
Yes. But if you look at also the overall breakdown
and the vote count,
Yeah.
he increased percentage-wise
Yes.
marginally
Yes.
over what had existed previously. So those were the numbers that came in. Now, if we want to do a further breakdown of this, for instance, we can do this on a region by region basis.
So let's start with Ashanti.
Ashanti region had 33. Or Kojo,
If Kojo can take us
Kojo go through.
So
or give us your charts.
Yes. So if you check the map, in 1996, the NPP won only the Ashanti region. It's the same for 1992. They won only the Ashanti region. But then the general figures, the NPP got more votes. Now, if you check the Ashanti region, NPP got 820,000, over 820,000. NDC got 412,000. But the other regions were basically for the NPP. If you check the northern region, Tamale, NDC got 370,000. NPP got 199,000. If you come to the Volta region, NPP got 690,000. NPP got 34,000. That was a huge difference. Then, if you come down to the Greater Accra region, for example, NDC got 658,000, NPP was 528,000, which was quite close. So Greater Accra region was quite close in 1996. Now, if you check a region like the Upper West region, NDC got 145,000, NPP 21,000. In fact, Upper West region, PNC beats the NPP in there. And then you go to Upper East region, which is Bolgatanga, which is the regional capital. NDC 230,000, NPP 58,000. So basically, that was the outlook. Now the BA, NDC 395,000, NPP was quite close, 230,000. So in the 1996 elections, strategically, NPP could have won Greater Accra region if they had pushed more, because if you look at the figures, 330,000, 259,000, it was quite close.
And it's interesting that he comes up with this because, Vivian, prior to that election, there was a poll that was held. Polls were happening at the time. Yeah, I don't know if it was beneficent though, but polls were certainly happening at the time. And prior to the election, 45% of the electorate had said they wanted a change based on certain factors. And again, they sound familiar. Guess what was top? Unemployment.
Unemployment.
2, the economy. They said these were the things that were going to affect. And these were the persons, most of them were considered floating voters. And if you remember, the MPP had a tagline,
Don't let me remove my key, please.
That was important for the MPP. That was based on, they carved out that particular tagline based on the outcome of the research that they had done. So they wanted to use that to reach persons in areas like Greater Accra, the western parts of the country, the central parts. Now, there was, if you know your UP tradition and your Buzia tradition and your Nkrumah tradition, CPP primarily does well in the central and the western. The Buzia tradition does well in the Ashanti, does well in the Bono eastern side. But, and again, it's accounted for the common sense in the measure. But if you look at the election outcome, and that's why I said this changed completely, Vivian, the presidential election especially, the political topography of our history, in the sense that the NDC won Central, won Western, which are considered CPP heartlands. And I'm talking about the presidential here. Also did well in the Ashanti and did well in the Bono, as Kojo's numbers have shown. So they showed that they were truly a national power at that point, doing well in the areas that traditionally
they wouldn't have
done well. And for the political history of this country, it was a significant change. Now, I come to my point about the 96 election being a significant consolidation. Now, if you look at the history of elections in this country, prior to the 92 elections, the elections that we had held in this country had been won by either the UP tradition or had been won by the Nkrumah tradition. 1992, based on what we had, was the first time that we had a party outside of these two traditions, headline, that had won an election. So, come 96, people were like, okay, do we get a return to the Nkrumahist Buzia, or we see a further entrenchment of this new social democratic style that the so-called Progressive Alliance had brought, the numbers rectified that. It showed that indeed we had changed. So we had now what we could reliably call a third force or a new force in the political coven, because now the conversation prior to that, one would always discuss UP tradition, Buzia tradition, Nkrumah's tradition. But that changed with the 1996 election, because this presidential win validated the presence of the NDC as a completely different political ideology in Ghanaian politics. And just to wrap this, I'm going to give you 2 quotes to wrap this part of the conversation so that we can dip into the parliamentary quickly, just to see this. Now remember Hudiaya. Hudiaya post this election said this. He said, the post-independence part of our history ended in 1970. The arrival in 1992 of the NDC introduced a new epoch, a new thinking, very different from what prevailed after independence through the early 70s. This was from the Ghanaian Times of December 1996. Now, if you go to Charles Rakubrobe.
Okay.
Yes.
Dr. Charles Rakubrobe.
Dr. Charles Rakubrobe, a.k.a. Tarzan.
That's the one for you.
Now, he found the United Ghana Movement, UGM. He agreed with Hudiaya, or he seemed to. And I'm quoting him from the Ghanaian Times of 19 December 1996. And he says the opposition underestimated the power of Light Lieutenant Rawlings. It is now the leading political force. And it is only when they, the opposition, realize this that they can begin to appreciate the extent of the problem that they face. So this tacit admission, Rawlings and the NDC, and I want to separate the two, the NDC as a political force,
quite a number of splinter groups out of the PNDC and all that
arrived in Ghanaian politics, 1996.
And you know what, Kojo, you are from the Ashanti region, and what beats my mind about that 1996 election and the fact that Kufuor from the Ashanti region, I mean, he won that region. He got about 65%. But the NDC, you know, also made some good figures from there. If you look at Rawlings himself, from his original place, Volta region, he won over 95%. And the only region that Kufuor won, he took quite a chunk, over 35% and all that. How did that play, you know, knowing that Kufuor is from that region, yet he wasn't able to, you know, significantly take over that region at the time?
Well, if you look at the Ashanti region, even more than the Ashanti region, there are certain constituencies that are very populated that lean towards the NDC. And back then, Kufuor was pushing to send his message across. Mind you, Rawlings had state machinery to his advantage.
A lot of resources. And
a lot of other things to his advantage. It was until later that Kufuor was able to push, especially in the 2000 election, when the message really sank deep and a lot of people went out there to vote for former President Kufuor, that he was able to get a bigger percentage of the votes in the Ashanti region. But at that point, if you look at where the NPP had come from in the 1992 elections to the 1996 elections, we would say that they had made some gains in the Ashanti region, gains that they would build on later in future to win the elections come the year 2000. The Volta region has been for the NDC. They had won a huge chunk of the votes. Look, over 90%. That was quite a big stretch. Aside the Ashanti region, we can even talk about the Boafo region. For the fact that we had people like J.H. Mensah and all these people from the Boafo region with the NPP, still the NPP couldn't win that particular region. It told you that a lot more work needed to be done by the NPP to win those regions they felt they should win going forward. And that's what we saw in the later elections. So for example, a region like the Eastern region was won by the NDC in 1996. But if you check the charts, in 2000 it was taken over by the NPP. 2000 runoff taken over by the NPP, 2004 taken over by the NPP. So Eastern region after 1996 became a primary domain for the NPP, where NPP could count on for votes every election.
Ashanti became those regions they can
so those two, if you look at the color coding of the map, since the 1996 elections have always been for the NPP. Even in the 2008 runoff, when NDC won all the other regions, NPP maintained the Ashanti and the Eastern region, and that has been the trend since.
Yeah, I was just saying that, look, let's also be honest. the ethnic tendency was there. Talking about what happened in the Ashanti, who was an Ashanti. 1979, Chima one of the youngest MPs there. Royal, wildly popular in the region. Finally, an Ashanti man
comes on the presidential ticket.
On the ballot. The Ashantis were not going to let him down. If you look at the single largest votes, if you go to the Volta region as well, Papa J cleared everything in the Volta region.
The Volta got over 95%. See how his own region, how he was able to pump it.
No, but that was also because, like I said, the advantage Papa J had was, if you look at the Shawa Sitinem, na to Aba, the NDC had a different one. What they sold at that point, and that was important to answer your question. They sold continuity. They sold stability. They sold development. So it was basically a matter of the devil you know is better than the angel you don't know. And that still resonated with people. And if you look at the constituencies that Papa J got his votes from, nothing has changed. Or if you look at it, New Edubiasi is still voting.
Actually,
NDC.
if you look at the figures, in 1996, Kufuor won 28 out of the 33 constituencies.
Which was
which is good. Which is good. But the figures is the figures.
The ethnocentrism showed up at that point. But it's also important, let me say, that the 96 election was one of the first elections that we can say we had a mix of party voting and issue-based voting. Normally, 1992 we can't consider that. But 96 we had that mix. These things mattered to people. That is why I spoke to you about that poll that was run, where people said employment matters to us. If, the economy matters to us.
And we're still voting based on these two issues, which really we haven't been able to.
But it was seminal at that point because people were willing to voice these things out for the first time. And so that's why in the 96, Vivian, if we have time, it's a
you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to go into the parliamentary. I'll do that tomorrow because we don't have enough time. So let's stay with the presidential. Tomorrow we do the parliamentary.
Let's roll back
but I want us to look at the regions. Let's start with the central region. The MPP won 3 constituencies, or Kufuor won 3 constituencies in the central region. Cape Coast, he won Jumako Enyan Isien, and also Upper Dentra. You know, interesting. What led to that? I mean, after boycotting the parliamentary, whatever, and all that. But how come he was able to pull those 3 constituencies? I'm wondering, how did the NDC lose those 3? If we know.
What will likely be the pull, as I spoke to you, for these ones, Kojo, give me
the figures
from 92.
For
the central
region. So we see what's going on here.
Yes, for the presidential.
Okay, so 1992 presidential for central region.
Yes, please.
Give me 1 second.
Okay,
so central region, we have 17.
Good.
And then he took 3. You know, in the 1990s, they boycotted, you know, all that, and he didn't get much from there. But this is, let's see, you have your 1996 now. Whilst you are looking for that, let me run us through the other regions, what they look like for the MPP at the time, or for Kufuor. Like I said, in the Ashanti region, he won 28 out of 33. The Bono region, 2 out of 21, quite poor. Central, 3 out of 17. Greater Accra, he won 17 out of 22, which was pretty good. Northern region, 3 out of 23. Upper East, 10 out of 12. Upper West, 7 out of 8. The Volta, this is actually the Volta for the, he won none of the 19, right? And then the Western, 14. So this is what we have for 1996. I don't know whether the
you want us to do
up now.
You want us to do the presidential for central region.
Yes.
In the central region, the NPP won 86 in 99. You won 92, right?
Yes, I want to run a comparison.
NDC had 222,000 for central region. NPP had 86,000. This is 1996, 1992. So let me give you that for 1996 so you compare. Now, in the year 1996, in the same central region, NDC got 330,000. NPP got 259,000.
And in the previous election,
in the previous election was 222,000 to 80 something thousand.
So obviously, the percentages went up.
Really? Yeah.
And they had 3 seats in parliament. Now, of the 2 constituencies that you just mentioned, Ejumaku, Enyan, Esiam, Cape Coast and Upper Danger, they didn't win Ejumaku, Enyan, Esiam in parliament, but they won Cape Coast and Upper Danger.
Yeah.
Cape Coast, Christine Chachak entered parliament for the first time.
Yes, for the first
and then
time.
Yano entered for Upper Danger. But like I was also saying, the benefits of linking up with the Nkrumah's tradition was certainly going to be felt in the central and the western region, because traditionally those places have always held a soft spot. So whether it was 1 vote or 2 votes, you were certainly going to improve based on the relationship that you had with them. So we saw the benefits of that particular relationship in a place like Cape Coast and Upper Danger, generally, where Kufuor won 3 of the 17, moving up from 9. And if you look at the numbers, Vivian, in the census, like I said, 28. In Dabono, 1, 2 of 21, up from 1 in 1992. So the other Sunyani East and Sunyani West.
Yep.
If you go to the Eastern region, they won 12 of the 26. If you look at Greater Accra, they won 17 of the 22. And by this, I am talking about the presidential election.
Yes.
But if you go to Parliament, for instance, Greater Accra, let's see.
Greater Accra, 22 out of 22 seats. NDC got 13, NPP got 9.
Okay.
Now, Ashanti, out of...
So before they did better in the presidential in Greater Accra as compared to the parliamentary, which is an interesting dynamic to Sorry.
So there's a bit of scat and blow somewhere.
Yes. Which is what I'm saying. You see, the 96 election, even if you look at the numbers, it is quite obvious. A whole lot of things went into play for a lot of voters in deciding that I want to vote for Party A or I want to vote for Party B.
Okay, guys, I have to let you go. Tomorrow we're doing the 1996 parliamentary election. A lot of information there.
Oh, yes.
The new guys, those who were re-elected, those who boycotted and decided to come, and then the inroads they made at the time.
And I just realized, look at the parliament, just small one.
Yes.
I see Afram Place North. Betty Crosby Menza is MP. 1996.
Interesting. 1996.
The
Some of the names that
name
emerged
was still Crosby Mensa. Father, mother, we'll find out.
Now, for viewers, one thing they have to do is that there's a lot of information they are putting out, and we're also trying to visualize a lot of the information.
Yes.
So if you go to citynewsroom.com/election dashboard, Ghana's official election dashboard, we've broken down a lot of the information for you in tables, infographics, maps, so that in your own spare time, you can play around these and understand some of the figures and some of the shifts from 1992 all the way to 2016.
So that's it on our screens, right?
Yes.
Everything is in there.
Yes.
All what we are just talking about,
In fact,
you can find it there, right?
Tomorrow we'll enter 1996 Parliament and we'll know the woman who won, the various numbers, all those coming up. But you can have a feel of those on citynewsroom.com/election dashboard, the official election platform for the 2020 election.
All right, guys, thank you so much.
Oh, yes.
Now, when we return, I'm going to take you to Wild West, because Joseph Yiletre, who's been in Parliament, actually he got into Parliament 1992, I believe, is bowing out of Parliament. Why and what's around him? We'll be giving you details of that when we come back, so don't go away. Comprehensive news. The City Newsroom at 8 p.m. on City TV is your most engaging news bulletin on TV.
It's a very oh, that's too bad. The youth are still throwing stones. They are still throwing stones here into our direction. And can I come in? I want to come in. Okay.
Telling your stories better with correspondents covering every corner of the country. Getting access to potable water is a daily struggle for residents of Kakichekopi and Balekopi communities in the Ada East district of the Greater Accra region.
City Newsroom at 8 p.m. Very fluent with issues that concern you.
This inquiry me cover on Mr. Rabbi, some one is here, bread. Told you kind of make 1 week. What do you say?
Is it unfair? What all this? What all this? We are dying! We are dying! We are dying for Choco!
With City Newsroom, your community is now connected.
In this our community, all of us, we are very sorry about this school. If we went to see the children, they are so small. Even my grandchildren are there. My grands outside there. If they come out from the school, I have this.
Every day at 8 p.m., City Newsroom is live on City TV.
And you're welcome back to the Voters Diary. My name is Vivian Kai Lokko. Now, I said I was going to take you to Wa West constituency. Indeed, I'm going to take you there to Joseph Yilechre. He came into the spotlight really around 1993, but actually went into Parliament in 2004. So before we look into that, I'm going to play a video. And after I play that video, I'll come back to the studio and we'll have a discussion around that video.
Joseph Yelechre has served 4 terms in Parliament. He entered the House in 2004 on the ticket of the NDC representing the Wa West constituency. But his involvement in politics preceded his entry into Parliament. Yelechre joined the NDC when it was formed in 1992 on the resumption of party politics in Ghana. He was appointed by Jerry Rawlings as Upper West Regional Minister in his government in 1993. He was subsequently made the Ambassador Extraordinaire and Plenipotentiary to Algeria with concurrent accreditation to Tunisia, the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, and Mauritania between 1997 and 2001. In February 2009, he was appointed Minister for Local Government and Rural Development by the new President of Ghana then, John Atta Mills. On January 4, 2011, he was appointed Minister of Health by the President, John Evans Atta Mills, in a cabinet reshuffle. He was involved in the famous or infamous dismissal of Professor Kwabena Frimpong Boateng from Kolebu Teaching Hospital. Joseph Yelechre combines his knowledge in pharmacy, law and diplomacy to provide insight into issues in that sector. He is the immediate past ranking member on the Health Committee of the House. In March 2020, he proposed the implementation of a partial lockdown in the early days of the coronavirus pandemic.
It's getting too late. And when we allow the situation to alarm everybody, the lockdown will be difficult to do. Indeed, if you look at it, we have to explain detailedly what the directives the President has already given, what they mean, and what the implications are for us all as a country. But a lockdown can only be in respect of the big cities, Accra and Kumasi. For them, by this time, there should have been a lockdown.
He, however, called for it to be implemented with the Ghanaian context in mind.
The circumstances elsewhere may even be worse than Ghana, but they've gone ahead to do the lockdown. Because the lockdown for a specified period will help all of us see how we can reduce the increasing figures.
In the 2016 election, Joseph Yelechre polled 12,658 votes, representing 42.9%, as against Daniel Dari of the MPP's 7,415 votes, representing 24.89% of the valid votes cast. When the term of the 7th Parliament expires in January 2021, Joseph Yelechre would not return to the House. He lost the NDC primaries in August 2019 to former Executive Secretary to the IGP, Superintendent Peter Lencheni Tobu.
So our MP Joseph Yeletre not going back to Parliament when we head to the polls in December. But let's look at his life in Parliament, his life in politics, his life in his constituency. To do that, I have Sixtus Don Ulo. When he's not doing what he's come to do now, he'll be leading our electoral team with regards to the Electoral Commission. Also, he's the one who deals with our legal stories as well. Sixtus, welcome to the Voters Diary.
Thank you, Vivian.
So are you from, where exactly are you from?
I'm from the Japa constituency.
Okay.
When you mention Japa, the name that easily comes to mind is Edward Salia, one of the prominent sons of the region who rose to become regional the Minister for Roads and Transport at the time, given a lot of credit for the work he did in improving the road network in the region. So, well, but I have lived in Wa.
You also become a prominent son of but you have been studying the Wa constituency, the two constituencies or so. So I think it's just right for us to bring you in to speak on that. But tell us about Yeletre. Who really is Joseph Yeletre?
Yeletre, when you look at him, affectionately called, the first name is Joseph, but a lot of people call him Yeletre because of the closeness that you find people having with him. If you go to Parliament House, when he's not on the floor making serious arguments interlaced with some comic reliefs, you see him at the coffee center with colleague members of Parliament on both sides, chatting away heartily. So you hardly find Yeletre as the kind of politician who is stuck on one side of the aisle. You see that even though he's NDC and he's been with the NDC, you also find him to have very good relationship with people on all other divides of the political coin. And so you find that because of his nature, because of the kind of person he is, he easily attracts friends from all angles. So whether in an executive position, as we saw in his appointment as health minister, local government minister, or as a diplomat, or as a pure lawmaker, you find that he's always attracting people to himself. That is the kind of person we find in him. We also know that he's a family man, and we understand that when he's not talking politics, when he's not making people laugh in the house, he's with his family having fun. Okay,
give us his educational background a bit, because I know he's a pharmacist. I know he has a bit of some diplomacy background, law as well. But before you do that, you can send us a message. The hashtag is Voters Diary. You can send us via Twitter, via Facebook, or on the numbers that will be scrolling on your sets in a few seconds. So what was his educational background?
You can describe him as the man of many colors. He's a pharmacist, as you have said, from KNUST. He was there to study for a Bachelor of Pharmacy in 75, and also he's a lawyer. He went to the Ghana School of Law. He was there between 2001 and 2006. He's a politician. I don't know the qualification we use to get into politics, but of course, from the very inception of multi-party politics in Ghana, he was, you can call him one of the founding members of the NDC from the Upper West region. So you tend to see him very close with party founder Jerry John Rawlings. So even before he officially came to Parliament in 2004, he had all these appointments that were listed in the brief profile about him. Quite substantive. In fact, you can say, even argue that he got an exposure even before the likes of Alban Bagbin, because he was made ambassador to 3 different jurisdictions at the same time. This was in 2001. Prior to that, 93, 97, he was regional minister for Upper West region. So you find that even before 2004, when he became prominent at the national scene, he was very active politically. He was doing a lot of work within the party and within government administration. Okay,
so we start with politics and go to his home constituency that you've been studying. What was it like politically over there, starting with the party itself, NDC, and segueing it into internal and external challenges he faced at the time?
The It is very interesting when you look at him at the constituency level. Now, let's look at him as a lawmaker and as an agent of development, if you like. We know that MPs technically are not agents of development, but by their work, and for members who represent very rural constituencies like his, you expect them to have a level of influence in dictating the pace of development, particularly if you find a member of parliament as influential as Yeletre, or with so much experience as he has had, and with so much connection within the party and within successive governments. You expect that such a person will be able to bring a lot of development to the constituency. Now, let's look at his politics in the constituency level. He has always struggled. 2004, when he started, it was good for him. In fact, if we look at the statistics, he won with 66.3% of the total vote cast. And this was a massive endorsement by the people. This was to prove that indeed we want this person to be our representative. Partly because of the kind of person he was, the kind of qualification he was bringing on board. You saw that if you had such a person with such an experience, a background, you would easily believe that he can easily represent you and then channel your problems, be able to attract the needed development to the area. So we could easily explain that away, how he won the 2004 elections with such a margin. But if you go through the successive elections that he's been through, 2008, 2012, and 2016, you see a particular trend. You see that he hasn't particularly found favor with the people. For instance, look at 2008. Let me look at the statistics, and I'll give you the reasons. 2008, there was a sharp drop in the figure he got. He lost like 2,000 votes. In fact, close to 3,000 votes between the 2004 and 2008 elections. What didn't he do right? Did he withdraw after getting the nod into parliament? Did he stop to represent the people, the actual concerns of the people? We will come to that. If you look at 2012, that's moving from 2008 to 2012, you saw an appreciation. Again, he gained by some close to 6,000 votes. So this will also tell you that maybe he learned some lessons from the 2008 elections.
So it went up from the 3 to 6.
From the 3 to 6. But 2016, it went down again. He lost some close to 4,000 votes. This was 3,007 votes. This is what he lost. That's at the national level. If you look at even the primaries that were held in 2016, he lost to the former police officer, Peter Tuobu. He lost miserably. Peter won with some 700 votes. Yeletre lost with some 300 votes. So you can imagine that Peter's votes would have divided Yeletre's votes by, in fact, 2 times. And that tells you that there was some real problem on the ground. Let's look at those issues. Being a rural constituency, the people have always expected a lot of development at a go. It's not one of those constituencies that you would say, let us take it in bits.
Let's do this, start to the roads, move to this, move to that. No, they wanted
because they have been deprived for so long. This was under Wa Central. And under Wa Central, they really didn't get anything. So the expectation, with the creation of new constituencies and districts is usually
development and all
exactly
that.
That
part of the
they also get a share of the national cake. And this probably was their expectation. And shortly after that, the creation of the constituency, there was also the development of the Hippo Sanctuary. So it's called the Wichao Hippo Sanctuary. Heritage caravan passed through there, and some came back with bad, terrible memories they shared with me. And that is one of the reasons he lost. That is one of the reasons the people don't seem to want him again. Because they felt
he didn't do much. He's not doing much.
He's not doing much to develop the road network in the area. And also to project and promote that singular tourist attraction in the area.
But why is he struggling with this development thing, which is a key thing that the people of the area are looking at?
I think that's the main reason he was voted out, the why he is struggling. Because the people think that if you compare him to somebody like Alban Bergman, compare him to somebody like Ambrose Derry, compare him to Benjamin Kumbo, these are top names from the region who variously have done their parts for their areas. But you go to his constituency and the story doesn't seem the same. More so because he's been Minister for Health, he's been Minister for Local Government and Rural Development. So part of the
he's
questions...
actually held positions in all the NDC dispensations.
Throughout. So the question a lot of the people have consistently asked from our interaction, that what has he done with all the connections that he built, or the network that he built, the influence that he has on the party, on government? What can they show for it? Because so they don't feel that the man Joseph Yelechre has delivered up to expectation. So road shouldn't have been a problem for them, but it is. The Accra side, from Bole Bamboy side, there's a village called Kolmasa, so there's a link there into his constituency. The road there is terrible. So, and I understand that was the same road Heritage Caravan used. Yes. And it's terrible.
It's terrible. So is it that he's having challenges with funding, his common fund allocation? Because I'm wondering if that is a road you use to your place, every main developmental issues there's a challenge. There must be a reason.
There must be a reason. Well, to his credit, the argument is that a chunk of his share of the common fund went into health projects.
In the constituency. Okay, which you can identify.
Which you can identify. We can mention them. Some motorbikes he bought for facilitation of or promotion of health within the. Remember, this is a very rural area, and you can't even talk about.
So then,
vehicles.
are we safe to say he's probably looking at more of health than infrastructure proper in terms of roads and the likes? Is that being somebody towards the health?
Yes, to be fair to him, it would be good to put it that way. But even with that, the people are still not satisfied. Because for such a constituency with a district, also rural, you have one district hospital, you have a number of health centers, but you do not have a polyclinic.
Okay.
And you know that there's a grading.
And there's not a definition.
So you have the health centers, which have very limited functions or duties or services they can render. And you have the district hospital. Now, if you are not able, you cannot be serviced by the district hospital, then it means that you have to be taken outside the district to work, for instance. And the road network is terrible. It will be difficult for them to help you. Again, if you look at the constituency, there's one prominent senior high school there. It's St. Ignatius, Lasia Tuolu, his own hometown. Now, this school attracts a lot of people nationwide. So you have students, and it's performing well. If you take away my very own St. Francis, which is the top in the region, no two ways about that.
So it's one of the good schools in that region.
Yes.
And what's the issue with that?
So one would have expected that with the attention that the school is bringing, you would have a better road network, you will have better telecommunication services. I understand that if you enter the district today, there's only a one particular spot at which you can make a call.
So one of the places that is difficult to really get network or communication. But I want us to now move to his time in Parliament, because we're almost running out of time. What was he like as somebody in the legislature?
In a sharp contrast, a very effective lawmaker. So if Yelechre found himself in a jurisdiction like the US, he would be laughed. He would make a huge impact, because a lot of focus will be on his core duty as a lawmaker. There's not a single bill that is passed in Parliament without his input. That we can give him credit for. At the time when you see a lot of members of Parliament filing out of the House because they are considering some provisions of a bill before the House, He's one of the few people, if there'll be 5 people in the house, he'll be one of those 5 people in the house.
Well, probably all the time in Accra and ensuring that the law is, yeah, so he's always...
So maybe that should even make us want to reconsider really the role of the true role of a
because he's really performing the real role of
real duty.
which is lawmaking.
I think Parliament is going to miss him a lot, especially when it comes to bills related to health, bills related to the environment. Parliament is going to miss him a lot. He's one of the people that the names you cannot do without mentioning. The report we just played on him talks about his early cautions, which probably informed government's action. We cannot tell when the virus broke out. Again, at the time in 2015 when Ebola broke out, he was one of the lone voices that started talking again in Parliament until we saw some action. So he seemed to have a lot of interest in health and health regulation in the country. And we think Parliament can rely on him even outside the
I'll let you tell us what he'll be remembered for before we go, but let me take a few messages. This one says, I am so impressed with the analysis and discussions on the 1996 presidential and parliamentary elections. Great insights and the sages of the legislature on Joseph Yelechere's time in Parliament. Kudos, Ellie, watching from Ho. This one says, MPP won the parliamentary seat of Ejumako Enya in 1996. Isaac Jumazi, who later became regional minister in 2001, won that seat in 1996. Also, this one from Ellie Fearless says, fantastic analysis and discussion going on City TV now with, you mentioned us here. And then let me take a few others who have sent us messages via WhatsApp as well. This one from Richard Baidu from Cape Coast says, this is one of the best I've seen in Cape Coast and is helping with my schooling, you say. Kobe says, day 2 of everyone else's favorite and credible news hub for election 2020 is just day 2, and the studio in number 11, Dr. Martin Lupin Adaboka, inside the nation's capital, is boiling already, you say. And then Babamo from Tamale says, in fact, City TV is always on point, Voters Diary program, and very educative. Kudos to you guys. So, Sixtus, what would we remember him for?
If you are a doctor, you may have bad memories. Remember when he was health minister, there was this serious strike embarked on by the doctors over allowances, arrears, and all of that. If you are a parliamentarian, you miss him for the great input that he makes to lawmaking. If you are in his constituency, what will you miss him for? Let's let the people tell us.
So let the people tell us. So he's out, he's not going anymore for the next elections, which is December 2020.
But I don't expect him to be quiet. I expect to still see, given his experience, I think that the party would want to leverage on the experience, particularly at the constituency level. Whatever his flaws at that level may be, he has the experience, he has the exposure, he has the network that the party can build on. One of his many flaws, as the people put it, is that he lost touch with the young people, and the young people didn't feel that he was adequately representing them or giving them the opportunities that they desire. But I think that if his successor is to go far, the successor will definitely need him.
Okay, Sixtus Don Ulo, thank you very much for bringing us up to speed on matters to do with the West constituency. Joseph Yeleche is the MP for that area. Sixtus is our Electoral Commission correspondent as well as our court correspondent here at City TV and City FM. My name is Vivian Kai Lokko. Our time is up. We have to make way for other programs. Tomorrow we'll be doing the 1996 elections, but parliamentary. We'll do the presidential one today. And thank you so much for your messages. We return tomorrow at the same time, 3 o'clock. But remember, we'll repeat this show at 10 p.m. tonight. So if you missed, somebody missed it and you want to let them watch it, they can do that at 10 o'clock tonight. Goodbye.